I'm Samantha Overton, 34 years old, and I stopped by my grandfather's house on a gray Tuesday in October without calling first. Walter opened the door before I finished knocking, his face the color of paper. He grabbed my sleeve and pulled me inside. "Get in, hide right now." I didn't ask why. I heard tires on the gravel behind me, my mother's car pulling into the driveway, and he pushed me toward the gap behind the pantry cabinet. My grandfather didn't look confused. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for me. In the next 40 minutes, I heard something that changed how I saw my mother forever, and what I did after that broke my family apart. Welcome back to Family Justice Vault, where quiet people find their voice, and the truth always finds its way to the table. If stories about family, courage, and standing your ground move you, subscribe. The gap behind the pantry smelled like cold coffee and old wood. My heart hit my ribs so hard I was sure they'd hear it. The front door opened without a knock. My mother's voice came first, bright and warm in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Dad, it's just us." Footsteps crossed the living room. Gerald, the man she'd married a year ago, and behind him a woman I didn't know, heels clicking on the hardwood my grandfather had laid himself. Something heavy landed on the coffee table. Papers. A thick stack of them. "We'll keep this simple," Walter, the stranger, said. "Just a few signatures today." I stayed frozen, staring through the crack in the cabinet, and I understood this wasn't a visit. It was an operation, and my grandfather had known it was coming. That was why he'd hidden me. Let me back up. My mother, Paula, is 57, and my whole life she ran our family like a thermostat, warm when she wanted something, cold when she didn't get it, and we all rearranged ourselves to warm her back up. I'm a geriatric nurse. I know exactly what it looks like when someone healthy gets treated like they're already gone. Gerald, 60, wore good shoes and talked about deals that never closed. 3 weeks earlier, my grandfather had stopped calling me on Sundays, and a bank letter meant for him had shown up forwarded to my mother's address. I'd called the bank. They couldn't discuss another person's account with me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Crouched behind that pantry, I finally understood I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been early, and I'd let myself be talked out of it. The stranger walked him through it in a flat, practiced voice, a financial power of attorney, so my mother could handle his accounts, his bills, everything. Gerald mentioned a lovely assisted living place across the county, once the house sold. My grandfather asked in a small voice what would happen to his garden. Nobody answered. Then my mother leaned in and said the thing I still hear at night. "He won't remember by Christmas anyway." She said it the way you'd mention rain, not cruel exactly. Worse, certain. Through the crack I watched his hand on the armrest, steady, not shaking, and against the side of the chair where they couldn't see, he was writing something small on a scrap of paper. The man they'd just declared too far gone to run his own life was quietly taking notes. For the next few minutes, my grandfather gave the performance of his life. He forgot Gerald's name twice. He asked about the garden 3 times until my mother's patience frayed. "Dad, please," she snapped, and I heard the real Paula slip through. He fumbled the pen, dropped it, apologized in a confused little voice, and they decided he was too tired to sign. They'd come back at the weekend. While they gathered their coats, my grandfather turned his head slowly toward the kitchen, toward exactly where I was hidden, and for 1 second his eyes were sharp and completely present. The smallest shake of his head, "Stay quiet, wait." Then the fog rolled back over his face and he asked if it was time for supper. The door clicked shut, the car pulled away. I counted to 60 in the dark. Then my grandfather said, in his own real voice, "You can come out now, Sam." He explained it plainly, the way he explained everything. He'd suspected for months that Paula and Gerald were after the house, so he'd started playing forgetful to see the whole plan instead of getting it piece by piece. "If I'd told you," he said, "you'd have found a reason to doubt me. You needed to hear it yourself." Then he pressed the scrap of paper into my hand. A name, Ruth Delgado, an elder law attorney, and a number underneath, $18,000. "That's what's gone in 3 months," he said. Small withdrawals, spaced out so they wouldn't trip an alarm. A new authorized contact had been added to his account to help him. The help was bleeding him dry. "They're not getting this house," I said. He almost smiled. "Then we'd better hurry. She has a key." That night I researched, and what I found made my stomach drop. Adult children are the most common perpetrators of elder financial abuse, not strangers, their own kids. Nearly 40% of reported cases. And once a power of attorney is signed, it's brutally hard to undo. If my mother got that signature, she wouldn't be breaking the law anymore. She'd be operating inside it, legally, with my grandfather's own name giving her permission. Ruth Delgado remembered my grandfather instantly. "Sharpest man in Belhaven," she said, and once I told her the truth, her warmth turned into something harder. As long as he hadn't signed, we had a door open, but it was closing fast. We needed 3 things: proof of competency, documentation of the missing money, and a report to Adult Protective Services. "If they've scheduled a signing this weekend," she said, "we're talking days, not weeks." I called Dr. Hale, a geriatrician I'd worked beside for 6 years. He booked Walter for a full cognitive evaluation 2 days out, a real exam, real scoring, nothing that could be challenged. "Good," my grandfather said when I told him. "Let them say I'm gone. I'll take the test and prove I'm here." My mother called the next morning, honey-voiced, fishing to see what I knew, dressing it up as concern for him. The old me would have rushed to reassure her. I felt the reflex rise in my throat and swallowed it. "That's really sad, Mom," I said. Flat, nothing else. Then casually, she mentioned his 80th birthday party at the end of the month. The whole family, neighbors, the pastor. She wanted witnesses. Whatever she was planning, she wanted it done in front of an audience so it would look like consensus instead of a robbery. Wednesday, I took my grandfather to the bank. He wanted his mailing address changed back and a full transaction printout. The young banker, Trevor, got more uncomfortable by the minute. A limited authorization had been signed weeks earlier, Gerald added as a signer, everything technically in order. Then Trevor said the thing that turned my blood cold. Someone had already called ahead, warning the bank that a power of attorney naming my mother was coming any day. So they'd be ready to honor it the moment it landed. The document wasn't signed yet, but the ground was prepared. They weren't waiting on the bank. They were waiting on him at the party, surrounded by people. That night I found the stranger. Renata Poole, self-styled elder care consultant. Not a lawyer, not a licensed social worker, just a notary who worked on commission getting elderly people to sign fast before family could object. Reviews described her showing up while a client was medicated and leaving an hour later with a signature. And her online booking page showed a long block held open for the afternoon of my grandfather's birthday. No client name, just a signing session. They'd planned it down to the hour. Cake, balloons, a room full of love, and then the papers in front of everyone, so half the town would swear he'd signed happily. Thursday, Dr. Hale examined him for nearly 2 hours and told me plainly, one of the sharpest 80-year-olds he'd seen in years, fully oriented, sound judgment. Signed, dated in writing. In the car afterward, my grandfather handed me an old tin box that had been my grandmother's. "It's time you had this," he said. "Read the letter first, alone." That night I opened it. My grandmother, Nora, had written it weeks before she died, warning the family about what money does to people. And one line about my mother undid me, that Paula had spent her childhood believing Walter loved his work more than her, and that hurt, real or imagined, can rot a person from the inside. "Please," she'd written, "don't let money decide who we are to each other." Underneath was my grandfather's original will and a deed of intention. The house was never meant to be sold. It was meant to fund a nursing scholarship in Nora's name. Friday, I filed the report with Adult Protective Services. The forwarded mail, the $18,000, the authorized user, Renata Poole and her booked appointment, the doctor's evaluation. Facts with dates. The caseworker was honest with me. An investigation would take weeks, not days. It wasn't going to arrive in time to save him at that party. If my grandfather was going to be protected, it would happen in that living room, in front of everyone, and I would have to be the one to do it. My mother found out about the doctor. She called Saturday, no more honey in her voice. "What do you think you're doing?" Digging around in his accounts, taking him behind my back. She called me a troublemaker, said I was tearing the family apart, said a real daughter would trust her mother. The oldest weapon in her arsenal, guilt, aimed straight at the place that had always folded me in half for 34 years. I waited for the fold. It didn't come. "I'm not going to argue with you, Mom," I said, steadier than I'd ever sounded. "I love Grandpa, and I'm not going to be quiet." Silence. Then she hissed that I'd regret this and hung up. She moved fast after that, changed the locks, told relatives I was the one manipulating him after the house. 2 cousins stopped answering my texts. For 2 days, I couldn't reach him at all, and that silence was the worst part of the whole ordeal. I got to him through the one door she couldn't lock, my own profession. A friend who ran a legitimate home health service did a wellness visit at his own request, which was entirely his right. He was fine, steady, sharp. And he'd sent a message through her. Before the locks changed, he'd quietly signed a limited legal authorization with Ruth Delgado, on the record with an independent witness, not power of attorney. The opposite, a narrow instrument protecting his money while he stayed fully in charge. He'd built his own countermove while I was building mine. Tell Sam not to worry about the party. Tell her to let them bring their papers. I met with Ruth to plan. "You can't just accuse your mother," she told me. "It's your word against hers. You have to let her show them herself. Let her perform. Then answer performance with proof. Facts, not feelings." I spent 6 days assembling a plain manila folder. The capacity evaluation on top, then the bank records with the 18,000 highlighted, then the APS investigation letter. Then everything on Renata Poole, and at the very back, my grandmother's letter and the original will. I decided against secretly recording anything. My grandfather had never faked evidence, only revealed what was already true. I'd do the same. 2 days out, a cousin who'd finally answered my texts told me the rest of the plan from the family group, chat I'd been quietly removed from. After the cake, my mother would gather everyone, give a tearful speech about his failing memory, and invite him to sign in front of the pastor and the neighbors, for transparency. Renata would be standing by with the pen. She'd built a room full of witnesses to bless her crime. Fine, a room full of witnesses cuts both ways. The night before, my grandfather told me his last move. He was going to play the fog one final time. Let her commit all the way, say every damning thing in front of every guest, before he dropped the act. "I need her to show them who she is before she finds out who I am," he said. "Tomorrow you don't hide. Tomorrow you stand right where everyone can see you." The party looked like love. That was the awful part. 80 gold balloons, a sheet cake with his name in blue frosting, neighbors, the pastor, casseroles. My mother moved through the room radiant, the devoted daughter, murmuring about how hard it was to watch her father decline. Gerald stood by the wall watching the door. Near the hallway, Renata Poole waited with a slim leather folio. My grandfather sat by the window, small and vague, letting a neighbor pat his hand. She tapped a fork against her glass. "Everyone, I have an announcement about Dad." She told the room how he'd been struggling, how it broke her heart, how someone had to protect him. She gestured, and Renata stepped forward with the papers. "So today," my mother said, "with all of you here, so there's no secret about any of it, Dad's going to sign over financial power of attorney to me, out in the open." Renata opened the folio, uncapped a pen. My grandfather asked, foggy and sweet, whether it was time for cake. The room laughed gently. I stepped into the middle of the floor. "Before Grandpa signs anything," I said, level, not loud, "I think everyone here should hear a few things first." My mother's smile stayed fixed. Her eyes went flat. "Samantha, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said. "You wanted this done in the open. Let's do it in the open." I laid the folder out one page at a time. A full cognitive evaluation from a geriatric specialist, completely competent, sharp memory, sound judgment. A murmur moved through the room. Bank records $18,000 in withdrawals he never made, and Gerald quietly added as an authorized user. A letter from Adult Protective Services, an open investigation into financial abuse. The word landed like a dropped plate, and this woman with the pen, I said, is Renata Poole, not a lawyer. Not a social worker. A notary paid by commission for every elderly person she gets to sign fast before family can object. She has an appointment booked for this exact afternoon. Renata capped her pen and reached for her folio. Everything I do is completely legal, she started. There's nothing legal about rushing a competent man into signing away his assets, said a voice from the doorway. Ruth Delgado stepped in. I'm Mr. Rayburn's attorney. He granted me limited authority 2 weeks ago, freely, with a witness, precisely because he knew this was coming. You may want to speak to your own lawyer before you say another word. Renata left without another sound. Gerald had nothing left in his mouth when I mentioned the $18,000 sitting in an account he was on. His own business collapsed, his own house behind on payments. In 5 minutes, the whole machine folded because none of it could survive daylight. Then my grandfather stood, and the fog was gone completely. I'd like to say something at my own party. The room went silent. I'm not confused, I haven't been. I've known for months what my daughter and her husband were planning, and I let them think I was slipping so they'd show me all of it, instead of taking it piece by piece. Everything my granddaughter just showed you is true. I'm sound of mind. Nothing gets signed in this house today. He turned to my mother. I stepped up beside him. No one signs anything today, Mom, I said. It's over. That was when she broke. All the polish fell away. You have no idea what I've given up for this family, she shouted. 40 years I stood in his shadow and I got nothing. Now you all stand here judging me. You're all against me. The louder she got, the smaller she became, and I let her keep going, because every word she said proved everything already sitting on that table. When she ran out of breath, I said quietly, get inside. Hide right now. That's what Grandpa told me the day you came for his house. I hid, and I heard everything. I'm not hiding anymore, and neither is he. I held up Dr. Hale's evaluation one last time, not as a weapon now, just a fact. You told them he wouldn't remember by Christmas anyway, I said. He'll remember this Christmas and everyone after it. The pastor stepped forward, put a gentle hand on her arm, and led her toward the door. At the threshold, she looked back once at her father. Whatever she was hoping to see, she didn't find it. The door clicked shut, and the house was quiet and his again. Well, he said to the stunned room, who wants cake? Somehow, people laughed, and the party breathed again. The weeks after were quieter than you'd think. Adult Protective Services confirmed everything the folder already showed, and the power of attorney was killed before it ever took effect. Most of the $18,000 was traced and recovered. Renata Poole was reported to the state and stopped taking clients in the county. Gerald didn't stay long once there was nothing left to take. My grandfather never pressed charges against my mother. She's still my daughter, he told me. I don't want her in a cell. I want her out of my accounts. That's what he got, every ounce of access gone, and a small town that already knew the real story by morning. He stayed in his house, in his garden, with his real key in his own pocket. And we set up the scholarship my grandmother had written about in that cookie tin, sending young women through nursing school in her name. He asked me to help run it. I said yes before he finished asking. I walked into that house a nurse who'd spent 34 years folding to keep the peace. I walked out understanding that staying quiet had never once kept anyone safe. If someone you love is being pushed to sign something they don't understand, don't wait. Ask questions. Keep records. Make the call. Share this so it reaches someone who needs it, and subscribe to Family Justice Vault.